Namaste, good evening, and good morning in various countries because people have joined from other countries, and good afternoon also because one of our boys connecting from London. This is going to be an important session from Lexindis. It's a virtual conversation on employment laws. A lot of changes have happened. A lot of changes are anticipated because the interpretation of those changes could be different, differently perceived, differently construed. And therefore, here we are with the battery of lawyers from Lexindis going to talk about employment laws. Time with us is 75 minutes, and we are very punctual in terms of our timelines. So we'll definitely close by 7:15. And therefore, in this short duration, lot many things cannot be discussed. Therefore, we felt instead of talking about the IR code, which is yet to be notified, and therefore, perhaps next year sometime, once it gets notified, how it's going to be interpreted, we may need to take another session. So we felt let's get into a complete package of employment laws. So, to the extent it pertains to the corporate world, small and medium enterprises, lawyers, consultants, smaller businessmen, academicians, and even today we have a lot of students who have registered to understand the various nuances of employment laws. My name is Rajiv Khurana, and I'll be more like a representation from your side to ask various questions to our panelists and understand things from their perspective. Now, there is nothing called white color or black color in the law. It's only been worn by the lawyers because everything is gray by nature. So, what the gray color means is something we shall be contemplating today. It is not necessary that there will be a perfect answer because everything depends on the facts and circumstances of the case, which is a good point for a lawyer to talk about because specifics are very, very important and nothing can be generalized. So, when we talk about the employment laws, when Adam and Eve came to this world, they didn't have the employment. For centuries, they were the entrepreneurs. One fine day, a powerful man became their leader and later on a king, and he started employing people. And for centuries, laws were more at the whims and fancies of that king. And gradually, with more literacy, with more industrialization, documentations started. And then came the Bollywood. And the Bollywood said, Ma, mujhe naukri lag gayi. And the story changed. Or another scenario of Bollywood where the bigger boss meets the hero and says, Kal se kaam pe aa jana. And the employment starts. But is the whole thing so easy? What are the nuances? What are the complications? The more you start getting into it, the more you start feeling. There are thousands of slips between the cup and the lips, and only the wearer knows where the shoe pinches. And today, we are going to examine the shoe as well as the foot size of the wearer in terms of what does employment law means to all of us. And therefore, I would like all of you to welcome my friends on the panel today who shall be answering lot many of these questions. Some of these questions I'll start asking and then I'll start picking up questions from you. Right at the bottom, you will see two tabs. One is a Q&A tab, another is a chat box. You wish to chat so many things, keep chatting. But if you wish to ask a particular question, kindly make sure that the question is put into the Q&A tab so that I know this is your Q&A thing which needs to be highlighted. I may pick up one question or I may club many questions together and ask our panelist. But that'll be maybe another half an hour from now because let the whole thing warm up, and I'm going to be asking many questions to them. So allow me to introduce you to my panelist today. First of all, let me introduce Mr. Saran Suri. And this, needless to say, in fact, that's what a very interesting finding. All of them are lawyers, qualified law graduates. But what is addition to that is something I need to talk about. Mr. Saran Suri is the senior partner of Lex Law Firm. And two things I must tell you about him. He has been a fabulous state level table tennis player. And second, you have to work little hard to get him into the right mood. And he's a wonderful singer. And that's how we enjoy his company all through. And of course, it's my privilege that we studied together in the same class at Shriram College of Commerce during 1977 to 1980. Let me also welcome Mr. S.P. Singh. Besides being a lawyer, of course, he has a deep interest in ancient and medieval Indian and world history, and he's an excellent swimmer. So he is, I'm sure, going to swim you through various ideas which he shall be talking about. I also welcome Suman Malhotra. Say hi so that you can come on the screen, please.
Hello,
Yeah. And Suman is a diehard fan of old school songs, and he's a movie buff. And I'm sure he would enjoy Saran's company more because the moment Saran gets into the mood of singing, that's a wonderful time for everyone. And I have the privilege of introducing Megha. She has an excellent passion for reading and she loves to travel. Welcome, Medha. And we have another smarty boy, Suhail Singh, who's
good
a
evening,
geek
everyone.
for thriller, documentaries, and is a complete sports person. Welcome, you all, friends. Thank you so much for joining in. And we now need to get into our question answers. But before I get into the question answer, let me ask Saran to briefly introduce Lex Indes law firms and talk about what all do you do so that you get a broader idea in terms of what the entire team does and then perhaps I'll get into questions with each one of them. Over to you, Saran, please.
Thanks, Rajiv. And now that Rajiv has already set the tone, friends, I'm going to sing you as to what Lexindis is all about. Lexindis, in fact, is a law firm which was an idea of four partners. Mr. Ajay Tandon is our managing partner. Mr. Sunil Kumar Gandhi, Mrs. Manjula Gandhi are the senior partners, along with me, who had set up this firm in 2008. Recently, we have added two new partners, young ones, because age was catching up with us. We have already put in 35 years or more than 35 years of practice. And this is Mr. Shivanshu Kumar and Mr. Namit Suri, who have been inducted as partners. In addition to them, we have a very experienced team of consultants, pan India, who continue to rub their shoulders as and when it is required. The team also comprises of young lawyers who add brawn to the brains, and that experience and energy is what we try to deliver to our clients in terms of churning out quality, whether it is litigation, whether it is arbitration, whether it is mediation, whether it is any kind of laws which need to be addressed. However, we do not deal with direct access. And during the pursuit of rendering our services, we cater to almost all kind of clients, right from large multinationals to big corporations to government clients as well as private clients. So having given this backdrop, I would briefly take permission to add a little bit of a thought as to why did we choose the topic of employment laws. And the reason for that was that there was too much of confusion in government trying to bring in industrial relations code. Neither the employers were clear nor the employees were clear. And the confusion was galore, as we all know that even the new IR code may find that it may get implemented from April 2021, but that is also not sure. Be that as it may be, the position remains that employment laws, which is much wider a issue than industrial relations code, because industrial relations code is confined to compliances which are stated in the act, for which we will be providing you a booklet if you would be interested. And that booklet would harmonize between the previous laws and the new changes which the industrial relations code tends to usher, to provide you clarification with respect to the industrial relations code. In today's conversation on employment laws, we want to touch the hot potatoes which both the management, the employers, the employees have always been hovering around, and there have been umpteen number of judgments from various courts, and they have been interpreted by various kind of lawyers under various kind of circumstances in various manners. There has been a lot of confusion, and as Rajiv has introduced you to our panelists, who are all experienced and seasoned people in their own rights and field of employment and labor laws, they're going to deal with these hot potatoes to answer to the queries. And I would request Rajiv to take over now. Thank
Thank
you.
you very much, Saran. Really appreciate. So before we get started, let me ask a question to all the participants, and you can put your answer in the chat box itself. And I'm going to read out very fast, depending on how fast you actually answer. God forbid, if there is a cut here and the blood starts coming out and you need stitches on your hand, who will you go to? Give me your answer in the chat box, please. Doctor. That's the answer. Bhavna ji is saying, doctor, doctor, doctor. MI room, doctor, doctor, dog, surgeon, doctor, nurse, doctor. You need good stitches. लंबा कट लग गया है, खून बहुत निकल रहा है, आपने पकड़ के गए हैं और आप जा रहे हैं डॉक्टर डिस्पेंसरी, क्योंकि अब आपको स्टिचेस चाहिए. आप सब अपने आप को 100 में से 110 नंबर दे सकते हैं, बिकॉज आप सबका आंसर ठीक है. लेकिन जरा सोचिए, आप जहां भी रहते हैं वहां पर शायद एक मोची भी रहता है पेड़ के नीचे, और वो ये पूछेगा, व्हाई आर यू गोइंग टू अ डॉक्टर? मैं भी चमड़े को सिलता हूं, मुझे दीजिए, मैं आपके हाथ की सिलाई कर दूंगा. जाओगे क्या? कोई नहीं जाएगा. Nobody will go. अच्छा, आपके पड़ोस का टेलर भी कहेगा, स्टिचिंग तो मैं भी बहुत बारीक करता हूं, मुझे लोग कोशिश करने दो, मैं आपके हाथ को सिल देता हूं, आप जाओगे क्या? द आंसर इज नो. ऑल ऑफ यू आर सेइंग इज नो, because you wish to go to a doctor. Why? Because he's a professional. And that's the reality as of today when we talk about the employment laws. Because I have spent more than 40 years in the HR fraternity, and I fully understand that when we get stuck, we take the advice of here and there, copy and paste plenty of things, but we don't go to the right lawyer. And then we complicate the things. And let me tell you, the secret is lawyers charge much more than the doctors. But in an emergency, you will go to a doctor, but you will not go to a lawyer in time so that you can save your lakhs where you could spend some 1,000 rupees. Now, this is something we wish to also focus on. In employment laws, What are the various nuances? Now, there's so many things we cannot cover easily, but I'm going to cover few of those things together so that we can do a good, honest coverage of those aspects. And then if you feel there is a need, we can actually have further series on employment laws and answer some of your questions. I'll try to pick up many of your questions, but in case we are not able to do that, rest assured your questions would be with us and we will send you the answers later on. That's a promise from LexIndis. So my first question, and this is inspired by all the Hindi movies I have seen in the 70s and 80s. Mama, mujhe naukri lag gayi. Mom, I got a job. And mom says, oh God, you're so kind. Now we can have a better life. The appointment letter itself. When I got my first appointment letter after 8 rejections, I read it more than 8 times. Later on, I never bothered about all the appointment letters I had. So my question to you, Suman, is when it comes to appointment letter, what are the various factors which must be kept in mind to draft a good appointment letter?
Whenever an employee gets the letter, appointment letter, उसका पहला यही सोच होती है हजारों ख्वाहिशें इस कंपनी की और हर ख्वाहिश पे दम निकले. The basic factors required for the drafting of the proper and authenticated appointment letters are the nomenclature of the job. First, utmost requirement is the nomenclature of the job, then the period of the employment. The next basic importance is the probation and its confirmation. But during this time, in this pandemic, we have learned one more thing regarding the relocation clause, where the workman is willing to work or the employer wants to get the work done, either from his home or from any other place of his choice. The next is the salary and compensation and the other benefits to be incorporated there. Change and adaptation of the department and the scope of the work is very much required there in the appointment letter. Notice period, non-disclosure agreement, and non-compete clause is utmost required. So these are the basic factors for drafting an appointment letter. Rajiv.
Wonderful, Suman. Thank you so much. But SP, let me ask you a question. Now, in the HR fraternity, we see a lot of groups asking for, can you send me a copy of the appointment letter? Can you send me a copy of all the HR rules? And then they copy and paste everything. And a lot of things are also available on the WhatsApp University. To what extent do you think that's valid enough, good enough to try? And what are the precautions on that? You have to unmute yourself, SP, please. Yeah.
Cut and paste, to a certain extent, people do start with it, but it is to be dealt very cautiously. In the sense, first of all, a cut and paste should be of a relevant letter. I won't say write an appointment letter every time you have to appoint anybody. So cut and paste will happen. So prepare a draft for every position level, like junior executive, executive manager, general manager, so workman. So every category has to be there. Secondly, when you do the cut paste, there has to be somebody in HR who has to read it again and again. He can't say last time ye issue kiya tha, same usko bhi de diya. That's where the folly happens. Letter for accounts man, HR man, electrician, technical, IT, there would be some difference. So take care of that and then only try to issue the letter. So somebody in HR has to be responsible to read each and every word and line before issuing the letter.
Well, thank you, SP. But let me ask you a supplementary question to this.
Mm-hmm.
When we accuse the HR guys to copy and paste, many of them also accuse the lawyers to use those things as templates, and they also do copy and paste. So what is the significance of going to a lawyer or a law firm to get those things validated?
See, law firm will examine it quite well from a legal perspective, and they have the expertise of all the laws which are there. So in fact, when you write an appointment letter, in my career I've seen, every time you are writing a letter, something new strikes in your mind. Last time this was a shortcoming, so let me correct it. This was not covered, let me do it. And so every time, and the lawyer, of course, the wide experience and the knowledge, because HR man of a company is dealing with his company, but the lawyer is dealing with 100 or 200 companies. So they know what is happening in the city or the world or the country, and they can cover the things.
Okay.
That is
And,
why
Uh,
the relocation clause is now the need of the hour.
Rajiv, I will also like to add to
Sure,
this
sure.
that it is like, being penny wise and pound foolish. What happens is that the employers generally miss this fact, and after burning their fingers and after having spent a fortune and earning a bad name and reputation to themselves, realize that how important it is to associate with a lawyer. Here, I am not advocating that it is only Lexindis that exists in the market and it is only Lexindis which has to be approached for this purpose. The freedom is there. What I am simply trying to advise is, as we often go for our health checkups to various clinics, even if we are not ill, and as we continue to age, our concern and responsibility towards our organization continues to grow. Similarly, it is the responsibility of the employer and management to take care of its growth. The more responsible it will be towards itself, the better it would be in future. And that is why I would go with Satinder and Suman to say that either they should be really, really cautious and should not indulge into cut and paste.
Yeah, but then it also brings in a very practical dimension, Saran. You talked about penny wise and pound foolish, but when the lawyers are perceived to be charging only the pounds, the client gets into a defense mechanism that, okay, if we can get something easily ready-made, which some lawyer would have vetted, that's why it has come to the market. Let's use that with a bit of common sense and work on it. To what extent organizations get into the danger of using these prefabricated documents?
Rajiv, if
Saran.
that would have been so, then the kind of litigation which is exponentially high would not have been there. No employer would have been hiring lawyers dime a dozen if they were exponentially so expensive for the circumstance. To bring forth for the House to consider was that had it not been for the situations that are self-created, the employers and managements would not have been hiring expensive lawyers.
Sure. So it's more like going to a law firm or lawyers is a kind of an insurance premium that you pay so that you safeguard yourself from the future contingencies. Very well said. But the question is now, which is what I want SP and Suman to respond quickly. When you make an appointment letter, it is a one-sided document. You won't make changes to the appointment letter based on the person you are hiring. Or jisko naukri chahiye, the person who needs the job says, okay, yaar, let me just sign blindly, because half of them, you don't even read the appointment letter before signing it.
Yes.
So when the clauses are one-sided, how does the law view this?
See,
Suman, SP, anyone?
it's an agreement between employee and the organization. So if all the clauses have to be legally valid and taken care of, if there is something irrational or totally out of contradictory to the law, it would be void ab initio as it is. So the legality part is on the onus is on the employer. Now coming to the employee, if he reads it or not, he should be reading it, and the employer should give adequate time to read it. And if he has a doubt, he should be approaching the HR at the earliest, if not immediately, maybe after joining, as to this is unclear and what to do and what does this mean. So,
Rajiv, here I'll add, sorry, Sandra, sorry.
so
Please.
the legality part, of course, the organization has to take care.
Sure.
You can't be entering into a illegal or against the society activity.
A
Rajiv,
very interesting comment is coming, Saran. Let me just read that
Please.
out before we respond, because from the comment box which I'm trying to read, why do we keep HR and law qualified professionals in HR department? They are good enough for framing such contractual appointment letters. Also, we have law department, legal executives in all companies. They can do a good job of vetting any contractual letter of appointment. Why a legal firm? Very important point, Mr. SP Singh. But please understand, all organizations are not big organizations. There are small and medium organizations. There are small businesses also. They also need to issue. There are small consulting organizations, service providers who may not have the benefit of big HR departments or legal departments, and therefore there will be a reliance for external support. And that's what we are talking about in terms of an overall scenario. For example, today also, with almost 200 people in this discussion, not all of them are belonging to very large organizations. So therefore, whatever we are discussing, we have to keep in mind that the learning expectations of broader number of participants are being taken care of.
Very right.
Okay,
So,
now another question which arises, and let me just move to the next one, because we just can't continue talking with the appointment letter itself. But there is one a point of pain, Suman, that keeps cropping up, and that's the probation clause.
Yes.
Many a times we say, "हाँ 6 महीने देखेंगे, उसके बाद we'll consider you," and invariably in a copy pasted appointment letter, we skip even confirming the person in writing. And sometimes even it doesn't say that it has to be in writing. What is your opinion based on various cases that you would have handled in the past, and what could be the legalities our audience needs to focus on? Suman, please.
The completion of the probation is based on the satisfactory performance of the duties during the course of the probation period. The question of the extension and its confirmation is in the service jurisprudence depends on the language of the terms of employment and the service rules. The basic point is the confirmation is always to be earned and conferred. Earned and conferred means that somebody should be there to confer it by confirmation. Various judgments are there and various pronouncements are there, but the three basic lines on this are, the first is that if there is a clause in the service rule or in the terms of employment with the extension period, with the maximum period of extension of the probation, in that case, the basic thing is that we have to consider up till what period he had satisfactorily performed his duty. And the next question will be its confirmation. Then the confirmation will be based only on the terms and conditions with the maximum period. The next line is, in such cases, the person can't be deemed to be confirmed unless and until there is a confirmation in writing.
All right. So,
Yes.
so the written confirmation is very vital, and in case it is not there, do we presuppose that अगर 2 साल कुछ नहीं हुआ तो 2 साल probation पे ही रहेगा क्या?
No. Then there is a second line also. If there is a service rule with the authority to extend the probation, but there are something to be acted upon by both, acted upon by the employer, that is the confirmation, or acted upon by the employee, that he has to pass some test to clear the confirmation. If in the absence of such no confirmation or the test being given by the employee, he can't be deemed to considered as deemed to be in the services.
Sure.
So basic thing is the confirmation by an act, and it is to be conferred.
Very interesting point. In fact, I'm also reading some of the comments, and I'll be mixing few questions from there and asking you more. Again, my participants are not necessarily from very large organizations, so they are asking for very, very practical stuff.
Rajiv,
Now, allow me, Saran,
out.
please. Allow me, Saran. I'll come back on that. So now, there are situations which is the organization is typically an unorganized sector. There were no appointment letters issued. So there were no confirmations also, no probation period. Jo chalta aa raha hai, wo chalta aa raha hai. And all of a sudden now they start, thinking of becoming bigs and they want to bring in certain kind of system. So is it okay? Can we issue them appointment letters from the back dates? And what kind of precautions such organizations must take into account, SP? How would you like to respond that?
See, backdate as it is, as the word itself says, is not a good strategy.
Okay.
That backdate letter is being issued, because the letter becomes effective when you issue it to the person. So the person, the day he is receiving it, it's effective from that date. So you can give a backdate letter, but you can't force an employee to accept it on a backdate. That would be, in fact, an illegal thing. Second point is, you may not give an appointment letter in such a situation. If you have not given appointment letter. Appointment letter has to be given practically on the day of joining, not later than that. So what the error has been done has been done. You can cover up this such kind of a situation in old organizations who did not issue appointment letters by incorporating all the clauses of appointment letter in the subsequent increment letter. That would
Okay.
be better.
That's a very good suggestion, SP, you are making. Saran, you wanted to say something, please, which I had to
I
interrupt
would
you at
just
that
like
time.
to add one more point in the previous discussion, that this extension of probation is okay. What you're saying, where up till the time it is not confirmed, it may be for 1 year, 2 year, or 3 year, whatever it is. But this is only for non-workman category. For workman category, the law is well settled by the Apex Court that 240 days, if it is covered, the workman becomes confirmed, even if you have not issued any letter. So the two categories have to be very clearly understood, workman and non-workman.
So when things are not defined, then perhaps it will go more by the law of contract rather than the pure law pertaining to the workman. And Saran, you have been a specialist on the contracts. What are your comments on this, please? Unmute yourself.
Yeah, Rajiv, basically, when it comes to contracts, as Satinder has very rightly pointed it out, I mean, we have to go by the facts. And rather, it would be very unhealthy in terms of, I mean, those organizations or managements who would try to cover up their acts by antedating or getting into such kind of practices. And very rightly, Satinder has pointed out that either in the increment letter or by any subsequent letter, we can say that with effect from such and such date, you had been confirmed, but I mean, there was no written confirmation as such. We are now retrospectively confirming the fact that you were confirmed and your probation was over on that particular date. And whatever residual dues, etc., are required to be paid in regard thereto are being paid to deal with such kind of similar situations, to give effect to a contract which needs to be the basis of any kind of a employee-employee relationship.
Okay, Saran, there was one comment which came in between, which I want to take it up, and then I will also ask a question to Suman and SP. A question is that how many organizations, smaller organizations, can even afford to go to expensive law firms? So one, there is a general perception that Lexington is an expensive law firm. You may have to actually rationalize your rates, Saran, on the lighter side. But let me tell you, friends, if you visit the website of Lexindis at lexindis.com, recently they have added a very interesting feature called Lex Lounge. Lex Lounge by Lexindis Law Offices, wherein if you write your questions in case you wish to consult Lexindis and you are a small business and you define your issues very clearly, a very expensive law firm is taken care of. But the second aspect, Saran, which is your strength area also, and is that these days, and some of the participants have also pointed out, that appointment letters also start having an arbitration clause, which is a healthy change also, because instead of rushing to the court, you can get into arbitration and sort out the matters more amicably. What has been your experience in arbitration and what would you recommend to the organizations? Saran, please.
Rajiv, I would be answering your question in two parts. First of all, with respect to the profession being a little more expensive when it comes to deal with the issues of employer and employee, let me tell you, the larger the organization, the more the legal departments or HR departments in an organization, the more is a tendency to take help and assistance of lawyers, and more so the most expensive ones. It's not that there is a lack of experience or lack of knowledge within the organization or within the department. However, the beauty of law is the more independent and more evolving thought process is there, and it is not impeded by your relationships or your being in-house, is the concern from where you get a very objective opinion to deal with situations. So that is one part of the existence and harmonious existence of in-house departments with the independent lawyers who simultaneously continue to exist in the market, and also to deal with the issue of the cost. Let me tell you that, I mean, it is the situation and circumstances which determines the cost. I mean, if we go to a lawyer well in time where, I mean, there is no emergency, the costs are never of concern. They can always be discussed. They can always be negotiated depending upon the size and the kind of time that is involved. I may tell you on behalf of all the law firms, and more so in COVID conditions, each and every law firm is amenable to provide services, and it is for that purpose only that the law firms continue to exist. They want to associate, they want to provide their clients with the best of services. Now, the third part of this question, which was addressed to me, was, may I request you, I've just lost track of that third part.
No, we are talking in terms of the usage of arbitration and what are your recommendations in terms of using
I'm
the
sorry,
arbitration?
I lost track of that arbitration part.
Yep.
I mean, arbitration over a period of time has continued to evolve in the commercial sectors of the Indian economy. As the Indian economy continues to upstage itself to invite the foreign investment, and we want to be on the same page and same level with the foreign investment, the foreign trends cannot be ignored. Arbitration is a very important and integral part of litigation. And let me tell you that even before arbitration, two more steps have been added to bring in amiability to resolving the disputes that may arise between an employer and employee, and that is in terms of mediation and conciliation. And the informal nature of dealing with these aspects is from where arbitration makes a lot of sense. Because whereas an employer or a management has an access to hiring good lawyers, big lawyers, expensive lawyers, employees generally are not that fortunate to fight such big lawyers and very long litigations and battles. And from there, these kind of informal forums of arbitration, mediation, and conciliation have continued to become strong in international arenas also. And I am sure they are going to have a very strong foothold in Indian conditions too.
That's a very reassuring comment, Saran, that you have talked about, because it is to the benefit of the employee that such kind of arbitration clauses are there in terms of mediation and conciliation, and he should not feel that the employer has put in an additional thing which is a burden on him. I think it's an easier way out for him to settle any kind of difference of opinion. That's very well said. In
Rajiv,
fact,
I would like to add one more
Suman.
thing.
Yeah.
In the new IR code, the provision of the arbitration to resolve the dispute between employer and employee is there, even if there is there is no such clause in the appointment letter. They can give the consent under an agreement and go for the arbitration to resolve the dispute.
That's very well said, which means that if you have to go by the usage of law, then we'll have to wait for the IR code to become to be implemented first and only then later on. But till that time, if the arbitration clause is there, or even if it is not there, and then you can make a request to the employer that can we go through arbitration, perhaps the employer would also be very willing to settle the matter through arbitration rather than going through the litigation, because the HR departments are expensive within the organization. The lawyers they engage are also expensive, and it is very important to solve the disputes as early as possible, because that is economically useful for the organization. Well, my friends, lots and lots of questions have come and comments have come. Sorry, I will not be in a position to do justice to that. We thought about covering various aspects of employment laws, but let me tell you, we may have to go for series 2, series 3 also, like web episodes, because only then we will be in a position to cover so many questions that you are talking about. And these are very vital questions. And let me tell you, on behalf of Lex Indis Law Firm, those questions shall be answered to you directly, but let me pick up some of the important questions which are coming. Well, one person had requested that about Lex Lounge and the sound went off. Well, it's very simple. You have to visit the website of lexindis.com, and on the front top itself, there is a provision of Lex Lounge. Just click in, put in your query, and the query will reach the Lex Indis Law Office. A lawyer will approach you. You can have a brief discussion based on your need. Another brief discussion with a senior lawyer can be arranged. If you are satisfied, well and good, and there are no fees charged. That's a service during this COVID period. Lex Indis Law Offices has started, extended. It's going on very well, but maybe I hope in times to come they continue with this kind of facility for small and medium enterprises as well as the startups. Now moved to the next one, and I'm being preempted by so many questions that instead of going by my sequence, I'm dropping some of those questions, SP, and I'm going straight into that. And a very interesting question came in. Can I keep a lawyer under bond for me for a few years and keep providing me legal service? That's a very good question, though the person has not mentioned the name. So now this brings us to the question, the validity of the bond itself, the employment bond itself, whether it is for a fixed period or underwritten in the form of certain money. Suman, how do you view this? And SP, kindly add to the answer after Suman is through, please.
The drafting of any covenant, whether it is a positive or a negative, I would like to say the negative covenant in a contract of employment is often a matter of great difficulty. The employment cases, the issue has been the validity of the covenant operating after the end of the services. There is no harm, there is no restriction on the competition during the period of the employment, which are normally valid and indeed may be implied by the law also. But the most difficult part is if the covenant is to operate after the cessation of the employment, what will be the situation? The court may refuse to enforce it. So the difficult part is the negative covenant in the contract of employment.
So you can't say that if you leave the job, you will not work with a competitor for the next 2 years' time. You can't say that if you leave the job, you have to pay 10 lakh rupees to us. You can't say that we have sent you abroad for training purposes. We have invested in you. Now you cannot leave the job. But then if such kind of situations happen, the employee doesn't know about this. And he's always under the fear. SP, how do you respond to that from an employer's perspective in terms of creating this kind of a psychological fear from a legal perspective also?
So the legal perspective in India is very clear. You can't have this negative covenant that you can't join a competitor. The case was well settled in the Pepsi versus Coke case, where Pepsi filed a case against Coca-Cola that they are taking their employees. So the Supreme Court long time back has upheld that you can't have this kind of thing. Although it would be interesting to tell you that this kind of restriction is valid in America, which is a highly democratic country. But over there, such kind of a restriction is a valid restriction, but not so in India. So in Indian context, you can't have this. Second, regarding the expense on training that we talked about, it has to be actual expense, like travel, stay, tuition fees the employer has paid for the employee. And in the worst scenario, if he leaves, the proportion of the tenure, like if he's for 2 years or 3 years, he pays off and he goes. He's a free man. So in that way, our democratic rights are much more than what it exists in even in America. And most
So
of
what
the
you're trying to say is that you invest in the training of the person overseas and he works with you for 6 months and you had contracted for 1 year of stay. He leaves in 6 months' time. The court can still grant 6 months of damage in favor of the employer. Am I right,
Yes.
SP?
and depending on the actual cost of training.
The actual cost of training and
You
not
can't
the
say-
perceived value which the employer has put into the clause.
Yes, actual cost of training is what is recoverable, not perceived value and what you are going to gain. So,
All right.
so the training goes with the employee.
I again come back to the question where we are talking about lawyers under the bond. If there are lawyers under the bond today, we are talking about gig employees also, gig consultants, contractors, etc. So when you draw out an agreement for their performance vis-a-vis your organization, Suman, what are the factors to be kept in mind while making such kind of a contract?
We should avoid the negative covenants like non-compete clause, but we have to work on the non-disclosure agreements.
Mhm.
Since the technical know-how is well with the person who has attained during the course of the employment, but non-compete clause we can't.
But then when we are talking about written agreement, the appointment order, or whatever name we give it, or a contract, there has been practices in the industry that for a similar kind of work which earlier the employee used to do, now they take the person as a consultant and expect the person to work like an employee but be called on paper a consultant. What do you think is the validity of such kind of arrangements organizations enter into, especially the smaller one, SP?
Such kind of arrangement is actually, if you just put it in one word, it is illegal, should
Hmm.
not be resorted to. If a person is coming to an organization and marking attendance, getting leave, and getting a regular salary on the along with the other employees, or maybe in the form of a retainership fee, then he's an employee. You're camouflaging employment with a retainership. Retainership has to be a person who comes infrequently and writes an email and visits once in a while. So in fact, the risk the organization is running by doing this is very high from two acts, especially the Provident Fund and ESI, because subsequently if the authorities or the employee complains that he is working like a regular employee but his Provident Fund is not being contributed, mind you, the employer will have to pay the entire Provident Fund contribution from the date of his joining. And the worst thing is that the employer has to pay both the contributions, the employee and the employer, along with the interest to the Provident Fund department. He cannot recover the employee contribution from the employee subsequently. So the risk of doing this thing, which is quite happening, but the risk is very high. So I would strictly advise not to resort to this kind of a thing, just to avoid a little cost.
That's a very interesting caution that you are giving to the employers right now. But
Yes.
then, very blindly, organizations are flouting also the contract labor provisions.
That is another thing.
How do you respond to that, Suman, SP? And of course, people are asking for a direct reference to the IR code, which is yet to be implemented. So maybe when you are answering, you may refer to the future possibility, which is currently not a law until it is put into the gadget.
Ajit, you are absolutely right. In the new IR code, the contractor is also included in the definition of the employer. So he can't go out of it that he will not comply with the provisions of the law.
Mhm.
Though he is, yes, you are absolutely right. He is flouting the law by not paying the minimum wages, by not deducting the ESI and the PF, by not depositing the same. So that has to be seen in the new Social Security Code and the IR Code.
SP.
But that's, in fact, you've presently also covered that all the legal provisions which a regular employee has to do, the principal employer is responsible. That he has to ensure that the contractor is doing. Although the new IR code does specify that the contractor is also an employer, but even in the previous one, it was implied and understood in that spirit. But this one makes it a little more clear.
But if you really look at it from a practical angle, I mean, everyone is flouting it, so nobody is taking it seriously. So organizations also go by the thinking that, okay, if nothing has happened to others, nothing will happen to us. Now, the danger is once they get caught, then what happens?
No, nothing is not happening. A lot of people are getting caught. The one big issue people are flouting is the Contract Labor Act is actually for workers,
Yeah.
not for non-workers. A lot of organizations are keeping executives, junior executives, even managers on through the contractor, which is not permitted. So if when the relations become sour between the contractor employees or with the contractor, things can become really ugly, I can tell you.
But then what are the options available to the managers? Because then they cannot take the provision of the Contract Labor Act, because then they will go more through the Contract Act.
No. Manager is an employee of the company. He has to
Okay.
be appointed. He cannot be appointed through the contractor or through as a consultant. Those two routes we have talked about, the consultant and also through the contractor.
But then as a manager, what are the safeguards available to him, especially under the new rules which may get implemented? Because now the term manager is also being used.
Yes,
Sumant.
now the manager is clear-cut, also an employee. Earlier it was, and he can also take a lot of safeguards that are being given to him, especially executive who is getting below 18,000 salary. For all practical purposes, he would be a workman.
Even the CLRA Act was a dual act. Some posts were abolished and some were regularized. So it was a dual act at that time. It was a CLRA Abolition and the Regulation Act. So that is why some posts were regularized and others were abolished.
Okay. Now, these are very interesting discussions which are happening right now, and lots of questions are coming, and many of these questions are very peculiar to their own circumstances, which I'm sorry I'll not be able to take up because time is running out and we will not be able to take up specific cases. And there are also questions which are not pertaining to employment laws, which have come up in the chat box as well as in the Q&A box. My apologies, I will not be able to do it right now, but the LexInDis team will make sure Suhail and Meda are working on those, and they will be ensuring that they will be reverting to you with the answers from their seniors along with the inputs which they would be adding on. Coming back to the situation now, we are talking about work from home. If an organization now wishes to employ new people, knowing fully well that the next 6 months to 1 year, they will not be opening the office for such a person, and such a person shall be operating from home, would you recommend any specific changes in the appointment letter itself? Suman and SP, please.
Yes, there are some changes required to be made in the appointment letter. With respect to now, with the introduction of these gig workers, platform workers, self-employed workers, the similar thing is to be done with the other persons who are already employed. So the important point is the location, the relocation clause is to be incorporated there with the term frequency and location. So two more important points are frequency and location, the frequency of the work from the home and from where he is working.
SP, would you like to add something to that?
What you said, that work from home situation in the widespread manner that we are seeing during this pandemic has to be added as a clause that you could be asked to work from home. And during this work from home, maybe the salary is also different. That should also be said, because otherwise it would be a heartburn. But definitely the employee is saving towards something like conveyance and travel and other things. So a clause may be added, which is not being done at the moment, but it would be very wise to add it for all new appointment letters.
But have you come across situations of late where in an organization, some people are working from home, whereas others, because of the necessity of their job, have to be at the workplace, and both get the same kind of earnings, whereas the guy who comes to the premises says, I am taking a much bigger risk.
Exactly.
I'm working in front of you, under your visible eyes, and the other guy, I don't know what he's doing at home, and he's not taking any kind of risk. So therefore, you need to bring in more changes favorable to my working conditions. What is your opinion, SP and Suman, vis-a-vis the queries coming to you and maybe some of the legalities of the matters if you have come across?
That's what I said earlier. The frequency of the work is to be judged on both the ends. The person who is performing the duty at his office and the person who is performing the duties at his home. The frequency, somebody should be there to check the frequency. So this is the basic aspect, that the salary can't be cut on both the ends.
All right.
Rajiv, here I'd
Yes,
like
sir,
to add a
please.
dimension.
G.
And that is that it is how you view the cup. I mean, the cup could be either half empty or it could be half full. There could be an employer who may visualizes and who wants to get into intricacies of the savings he makes in terms of an employee who is sitting at home and is again, counting pennies. And there may be an employer whom is only concerned with the work, whether the employee does it from home or he does it from the woods. And he's concerned with the work. And he simply incorporates in the appointment letter that you may be even on moon. I'm not concerned. I am concerned with the work. So I am simply proposing it to the prospective employers and maybe whosoever is concerned, that it will be a question of a perspective, and how well it is incorporated in the appointment letter is what is going to determine the roles and responsibilities and rights of the employers and employees vis-a-vis the work from home concept is concerned.
That's very well said, Saran, because at the end of the day, it is not the legal interpretation of the employer-employee relationship. That is the bare minimum requirement. But what is more important is how strong leadership within the organization you create. What kind of work culture are you creating? How robust are your HR system, HR culture, HR leadership, people engagement, people experiences? That matters a lot. Legal aspects come only when certain interpretations are needed or disparities of the views that may start happening. So till that time that you're turning out to be a fabulous organization, don't worry, don't go to the lawyers. But relating to this, SP, I have an interesting different kind of a question.
Yes.
Now, this is a question which many organizations, even small and medium organizations, practice. They say, we are a very progressive organization. We believe and trust our employees. We don't even ask them to sign the attendance register. We don't even ask them to maintain any leave record. Whenever they want leave, we'll give them the leave. We don't do any kind of deduction. We totally trust their performance. We believe that they'll be turning out the 8 or 10 hours of work every day. Now, if I don't need to maintain, and my people are also happy, ask them. If that kind of a situation, what do you think is the need and necessity of all kind of legal records vis-a-vis employment which the organization will have to maintain? It's a hypothetical question, but let me tell you, practically a majority of the entrepreneurs would think, what is the need for legality when we are looking after our people? Your answer, please.
No, it's not a hypothetical question. It's a very legal question. and the legal requirement, you may trust your employees regarding the timing, regarding the leave. You may take their whatever they say, what time they have come, what time they have gone, and how many leave they have taken. But the attendance, the muster roll, daily attendance record has to be maintained. When I say daily attendance record, it doesn't mean that old attendance record where everybody was signing PP or coming in time or something. It can be a soft copy also. It is a legal requirement. Any government authority can come and say how many people are inside. In fact, that is slightly because of the safety angle, like how many people are inside, and if anything happens, the number can be counted. Second is the leave record. You may trust your employees, but how much leave an employee has, there has to be a record. You can't say we are not maintaining. So these are statutory registers under the Factories Act and Shops and Establishment Act, and all organizations are covered under either of them. So when you are covered, and this is the requirement of the Factories Act and the Shops and Establishment Act, you have to maintain them.
I do hope that all these statutory bodies would take a little lenient view during this COVID time, because a lot of things are getting mixed up. Employees times are working for 12 to 16 hours also a day based on, and they don't have even their own personal time. And at many times they may not even have enough work. So all these things and the records are not being maintained. I hope all these statutory bodies are taking care of all this, especially with new laws coming in. I hope for some time they'll also adopt a very lenient view. I have a very interesting experience which is coming from overseas from Kamol Patara, who's saying, I'm a solicitor in the UK and possibly in India too. And here, due to COVID-19 in the UK, going to be a lot of redundancies, layoffs, dismissals. So employment law cases acting for employee and employer are going to increase. What are your comments in India going to see this surge in cases? Saran Suri, Suman, SP, anyone can answer that, please.
Rajiv, actually, knowledge is always the base of avoiding any kind of a conflict. Unfortunately, we all have been fence sitters and we have never realized the importance of knowledge. And we always think in terms of saving a little bit of money here and there. And my request to anybody and everybody would be that wherever and anywhere, whether it is free or for cost, if you can acquire knowledge well in time, it can save you from any kind of conflicts. And although conflicts are inevitable, every new situation creates a new situation and new kind of a conflict arises. But then every kind of a conflict can be diffused with the knowledge that you possess. And we should be always mindful of the fact that irrespective of getting into the issues of whether I am a management or an employer or an employee and getting fastidious about the issues of law, we should be interpreting it in a reasonable manner, and we should not try to stretch things to one-sidedness and try to balance out the situations where healthy market conditions would get created, which would espouse confidence for both the management employers on one side as well as the employees on the other, which will avoid any and every kind of a conflict, or there would be an opportunity to resolve it so fast that it will not be at the cost of the economy or at the cost of the organization.
Thank you so much, Saran. You've been always very profound. Time is running out,
I'll
and
just-
lots, SP, sorry, I'm now pushing a little faster. Lots and lots of questions are also coming. People are showing a lot of interest in the Lex Lounge. Even students are asking whether they can ask questions in the Lex Lounge. My request would be keep asking questions. We may actually, Meda is smiling at me, because we may actually have more series of these discussions, because let me tell you, whatever we had anticipated, we have only been in a position to cover 30% of the questions, because we all are getting into the discussion and lots of questions are coming. But one important dimension, Meda and Suhail, I want you to respond to. Lexindes has been doing a lot of compliance audits for HR in various organizations. and you are the front end captains and majors going into the organization doing such kind of a things. So tell us your experiences ki jaane se pehle, before you go there, what kind of a thing you tell the organization, hey, be ready, we are coming to check it out, because the organization says come and check me and report. And then when you go and check out, what are the things you check out, and then post your checking, your audits, what kind of an implementation do you ensure? So I'm giving you a very comprehensive question, so please respond to that before the time runs out. Medha and Suhail, both of you, open to you.
So, sir, basically, what we at LexIndus do during a labor compliance audit is that we firstly do a health checkup of the company. Like a human body checkup, we undertake a health checkup of the company from the labor law compliance point of view. This helps the top management to understand where they stand as on date, what activities has to be completed as soon as possible, and which activities can be done over a given specified period of time. So basically, what we are telling them is to prioritize and plan activities with the concerned team. The second thing that we do is to create a legal compliance dashboard, which is very important and which is carried on the basis of location wise. In an easy way to understand manner with four color codes, we provide the management an idea where they are at different location in terms of compliance status. Lastly, there is audit report. When we go in an establishment, our team checks each and every document and suggests various ways to improve compliance. We also suggest ways to do things in a simpler manner, and it would be interesting to know that the same law is understood differently in different states, as the authorities have their own way of interpreting the same law, as you all know. Though, in my opinion, labor law audit is not compulsory or mandatory, but it is highly recommended because, in the event of non compliance by a company, it attracts penal provisions which include imprisonment, fine, or even both, depending on the type of default. So, therefore, a labor compliance audit is a must for all the establishments. So,
That's wonderful, Suhail. So here is the young force of LexIndus looking at the compliances and not the fighting part of it. Medha, what would you add to what Suhail has talked about?
Adding to what Suhail has already said is the fact that the objective behind conducting a compliance audit is that every organization needs to follow some government set guidelines and laws which are related to taxes, employees, and payments. And these guidelines and laws fall under statutory compliances. So, when an organization fails to maintain these statutory compliances, there are penalties and fines which are imposed by various authorized bodies. So, obeying such statutory compliance is very important in India. And this compliance audit will reveal all the strong and weak areas in terms of compliance and lay out a clear plan on how to move ahead. And based on the audit findings and consultation with the client, we then proceed with other activities to make sure that the business is 100% compliant to all statutes and labor laws. So it becomes important also because I feel with the compliance, a lot of factors related to a company are attached. For instance, if a company suffers non-compliance related to maybe TDS or labor compliance, the company's reputation is at stake, and the existing employees start doubting the efficiency of the company, and the potential employees may even not be interested in joining. And it is not only the because we are talking about employment laws and labor laws, so it's not only in relation with the labor or the employees. It is even if the statutory compliance is not maintained, the customer loyalty is also severely hampered. So just as employees start doubting the organization for poor compliance structure, customers are also unwilling to work with organizations that have poor statutory compliance. And I feel one of the most important things is another big reason for maintaining a statutory compliance will be financial losses. When non-compliance penalties and fines are imposed on an organization, financial losses follow, and this can disrupt the cash flow to a great extent of maybe a small or medium-sized company. So avoidance of litigation and associated costs which may arise out of non-compliance is what a compliance audit endeavors or aims towards.
That's very well put, Medha. But tell me frankly, what percentage of the client organizations are actually serious in getting these kind of audits done from law firms? Baki to they may be thinking, oh, we can do it. We are doing all kind of compliances. We don't need to be shown the mirror, because this is where you actually show them the mirror that this is where your future risk comes in. To what extent you think organizations are serious about it? And maybe Suman and SP, from your experiences also you can respond, but let Medha respond first.
I feel so from experience, the limited experience that I've had, is that companies are not aware about the fact that so many compliances need to be carried out by them. And when we go there, when we meet the clients, we ask for documents and we see the minimum compliances that they have to do with respect to minimum wages or PF, gratuity, and they many a times they're not even aware because about the legal and the compliance and the penal consequences. So lack of awareness, I think, is one of the reasons.
So that
For
means there is no compliance requirement to carry out the compliance audit, but to do a compliance in time makes a better legal sense. SP
right.
and Suman, do you agree to this also?
Yes,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, what happens is organizations go on and there's no prosecution. So some things are overlooked and some laws they are not following.
Sure.
So outside agency comes at a very nominal cost and they tell what is right and wrong. And the top management is not taken by surprise. The other big factor is that the turnover in HR department in every company is a very high. And that's a reality you have to live with. So the present team would say that we were not there when this thing was
So blame the predecessor and
this,
create more trouble for the next level. And after 2 years, when you move out, you can then play the same kind of a game in the new employer. So that's the thing with somewhere. And on the professional front, the legal requirement compliances which the HR department is responsible for are not being taken care of. So therefore, they look at it from a very short-sighted angle. And therefore, it is the responsibility of the top management to ensure that such compliances are done in time. It is a time-saving mechanism. It is a highly money-saving mechanism. And as Medha talked about it very rightly, Medha, you don't have less experience. You have very good maturity to talk about it from a law firm perspective also, that it makes sense from a customer angle, from a branding angle, that your compliances are absolutely 100% in order, so that you go to your customer with clean hands and thereby create a better credibility for your own organization. And therefore, such compliances make a much better business sense.
yes.
Time has been running out. We are left with 1.5 minutes and we always finish on time. So we had so many questions. I'm sorry, I've not been able to finish all of them. Perhaps next few rounds, Medha, which you will now take the responsibility of hosting, we may not be in a position to cover all the questions which are there. So many of the questions would be coming your way in the Lex Lounge, and maybe respond to that, and then identify more areas based on the questions in terms of what could be the next rounds. We could have straight away gone into the IR code discussion, but those would be only the hypothetical aspect of discussion. Does not make sense because we do not know when are they going to be implemented. So until they get implemented, whatever is the law of the land, whatever are the practices, we need to comply with. So with this, my dear friends, there is a very important question to all the participants. If you have really liked these discussions, and if you want to encourage Medha, Suhail and their seniors in the organization, everyone in Lex Indes, give a thumbs up. If you have liked it, put a yes, Y mark into the chat box, so we all know that you have really liked it, you have enjoyed it, and that would be an encouragement for all of us to come back to all of you again and again and talk about it. We had more than 200 people participating. everyone has thoroughly enjoyed. Keep writing to us. And the trouble is, we have not just run away from the discussion. We have been glued on to the discussion. And my request would be everyone raises his hand like this. All of you on the panel also raise your hand like this. We have done a fabulous job. Give a pat to your back for doing a fabulous job, and to the audience for doing a very fabulous job of being a wonderful, lovely audience. Time is precisely 7:15. Here and now, we close. Thank you very much. Namaskar. Have a great evening.